Let us concentrate for a few moments. It's very, very important that we leave all our baggage outside and we concentrate always on Savitri, on the beauty of Sri Aurobindo's work, the mantric aspect of his lines, the power, the choice of words, the alliteration, the harmony that we feel. So now we are still in the book of beginnings and the secret knowledge. So we have the following lines. This is telling us about man, who he tells us above some lines is still a child in nature's mighty hands. And he is one who lives in the succession of the moments, which we really all do. And all of us stare back at a phantom past, the future. It's so fast we can't see it. So he is armed, man is armed with a limited and precarious strength. Now, precarious here is very important because it tells us that it's dangerously lacking in security or stability. So it is subject to unknown conditions. Man is armed with a limited, precarious strength. He saves his fruits of work from adverse chance. Well, we all want to save our works, whether we've written a poem or whether we've created a monument, a cathedral. It doesn't matter. Man wants to save these fruits of work from adverse chance. And we see today in the world just the opposite happening. These people destroying temples of antiquity. So a struggling ignorance is his wisdom's mate. Yes, of course, the mate of our wisdom is always a struggling ignorance because we wait to see the consequence of our acts. He waits to see the consequence of his acts. The consequence of his acts, Sri Aurobindo speaks a bit about what naturally follows, which is a consequence. He says, karma is nothing but the will of the spirit in action. Consequence, nothing but the creation of will. What is in the will of being expresses itself in karma and consequence. When the will is limited in mind, karma appears as a bondage and a limitation. Consequence as a reaction or an imposition. But when the will of the being is infinite in the spirit, karma and consequence become instead the joy of the creative spirit, the construction of the eternal mechanist, the word and drama of the eternal poet, the harmony of the eternal musician, the play of the eternal child. How beautiful that is. That's from his essays in philosophy and yoga, where he tells us then when the will of the being becomes infinite in the spirit, karma and consequence become totally different things. They become the joy of the creative spirit, the word and drama of the eternal poet, the harmony of the eternal musician, and the play of the eternal child. But right now, man waits, Look, he has 6 lines, and 5 of those 6 lines, he begins with the word he. He waits to see the consequence of his acts. He waits to weigh the certitude of his thoughts. He knows not what he shall achieve or when. He knows not whether at last he shall survive or end like the mastodon and the sloth and perish from the earth where he was king. See, the mastodon was for the Miocene age and the Pleistocene epochs. He had a huge, huge being with curved tusks. And he was massive, elephant-like. Now, the sloth is a sluggish animal, and you can still see them in some countries. They inhabit parts of tropical Central and South America, and they have hook-like claws that they use to grip the branches, and they move slowly along, usually in an upside-down position. But the sloth, we have taken that word and made it into many different definitions of laziness, inactivity. So man does not know whether at last he shall survive or end like the mastodon and the sloth and perish from the earth where he was king. Now, I have spoken to you previously about Mother's statement of the 6 pralayas and how there will not be a present. But in this canto, Sri Aurobindo is speaking about the mass of men, not about the few of us who have come to be transformed into the new world. So Sri Aurobindo continues, and he writes, he is ignorant of the meaning of his life. He is ignorant of his high and splendid fate. But even many of us are not still aware of our high and splendid fate. Though we are reaching for it, and though we are aspiring for it, we are still not aware of it. The meaning of his life, I think, has become clearer to many of us, which is saying something very important. Now, Sri Aurobindo says, only the immortals on their deathless heights, dwelling beyond the walls of time and space, masters of living, free from the bonds of thought, and then I have to go into the next page, but let's take this first of all, because there's quite a lot here. These immortals are not subject to death. They are everlasting, perpetual. They dwell beyond the walls of time and space. Someone has to tell me whether we've done time in our Sunday Savitri. Have we used Sri Aurobindo's definitions of time?
Long ago we did. We can do it once more.
Very good. Because he tells us in the essays on the Gita that time and space are the conceptual movement and extension of the Godhead in us. How very powerful that is, huh? The conceptual movement and the extension of the Godhead in us. He has a lot to say in the letters on yoga. Time and space are not limited. They are infinite. They are the terms of an extension of consciousness in which things take place or are arranged in a certain relation, succession, order. There are again different orders of time and space. That too depends on the consciousness. The eternal is extended in time and space, but he is also beyond all time and space. Timelessness and time are two terms of the eternal existence. The spaceless eternal is not one indivisible infinity of space. There is in it no near or far, no here or there. The timeless eternal is not measurable by years or hours or eons. The experience of it has been described as the eternal moment. But for the mind, this state cannot be described, except by negatives. One has to go beyond and to realize it. Mother often tells us that we cannot understand many terms unless we go beyond to realize them. In the Synthesis of Yoga, he writes, time is a field of circumstances and forces, meeting and working out a resultant progression whose course it measures. To the ego, it is a tyrant or a resistance. To the divine, an instrument. Therefore, while our effort is personal, time appears as a resistance. Why? For it presents to us all the obstruction of the forces that conflict with our own. When the divine working and the personal are combined in our consciousness, it appears as a medium and a condition. And now the important line, most important, when the two become one, it appears as a servant and instrument. In the Life Divine, he says time is a manifestation of the eternal. And lastly, in the Synthesis, he elaborates a little bit more. Time presents itself to human effort as an enemy or a friend, as a resistance, a medium, or an instrument. But always it is really the instrument of the soul. So these masters of living, free from the bonds of thought, and he says they dwell beyond the walls of time and space. And he gives us a very good definition of space from the Life Divine. It is possible in pure mentality to disregard the movement of event and the disposition of substance, and realize the pure movement of conscious force, which constitutes space and time. These two are then merely two aspects of the universal force of consciousness, which in their intertwined interaction comprehend the warp and woof of its action upon itself. And to a consciousness higher than mind, which should regard our past, present, and future in one view, containing and not contained in them, not situated at a particular moment of time for its point of prospection. Time might well offer itself as an eternal present. And to the same consciousness, not situated at any particular point in space, but containing all points and regions in itself, space also might well offer itself as a subjective and indivisible extension, no less subjective than time. So, this idea of seeing everything subjectively instead of objectively, in the terms that science has done for many centuries, is extremely important because we are eternal. And whether we have to take 10 more births or 100 more births, both Mother and Sri Aurobindo tell us that we will realize what we have come for, the transformation, the supramental world. Now, these beings that Sri Aurobindo speaks to us so eloquently about, these immortals on their deathless heights, who dwell beyond the walls of time and space, where we unfortunately dwell most of the time, are masters of living. They are free from the bonds of thought. And what else does he say? He says about thought, which he capitalizes here, because thought is extremely important. And I will go through what he speaks to us about thought, which may well take up the rest of our time, but it is so very important. A bond, of course, is a fetter. It's something that binds us, ties us, holds us together. And it can be a bond that ties one to a certain circumstance or a line of behavior. But it is also a uniting force. It can be a link. So here, these masters of living are free from these bonds, these restrictions of thought. And Sri Aurobindo tells us in The Life Divine, thought in itself, in its origin, on the higher levels of consciousness, is a perception, a cognitive seizing of the object or of some truth in things, which is a powerful but still a minor and secondary result of spiritual vision. So it is a cognitive seeing, it is a perception, but it is still not spiritual vision. A comparatively external and superficial regard of the self upon the self, the subject upon itself, or something of itself as object. And then he continues in Essays Divine Human. A thought is an arrow shot at the truth. It can hit a point, but not cover the whole target. But the archer is too well satisfied with his success to ask anything farther. And a couple from Essays in Philosophy and Yoga. All living thought is a world in preparation. Very interesting. All living thought is a world in preparation. All real act is a thought manifested. And then he continues in these essays in Philosophy and Yoga. Thought is not essential to existence, nor its cause, but it is an instrument for becoming. It's most interesting, not essential to existence, nor even the cause of existence, but it is an instrument for becoming. I become what I see in myself. All that thought suggests to me, I can do. All that thought reveals in me, I can become. This should be man's unshakable faith in himself. because God dwells in him. In the synthesis, he says, in reality, thought is only a scout and pioneer. It can guide, but not command or effectuate. And then some quotes from Letters on Yoga. There are quite a few of them, actually. There are 7 of them. And I'd like to go through them with you. Because in these Letters on Yoga, he writes often in a little more, shall I say, personal way to his disciples. The first, but there is another kind of thought that springs out as if it were a body or form of the experience or of the consciousness involved in it or of a part of that consciousness. And this does not seem to me to be intellectual in its character. It has another light, another power in it, a sense within the sense. Our thoughts are not really created within ourselves independently. This is a very, very critical paragraph. In the small, narrow thinking machine we call our mind, in fact, they come to us from a vast mental space or ether, either as mind waves or waves of mind force that carry a significance, which takes shape in our personal mind, or as thought formations ready-made, which we adopt and call ours. Whoa. Our outer mind is blind to this process of nature, but by the awakening of the inner mind, we can become aware of it. So our thoughts are not really created within ourselves. Continuing on. That is the way things come. Only one does not notice. Thoughts, ideas, happy inventions, etc., are always wandering about in thought waves or otherwise, seeking a mind that may embody them. Oh. One mind takes, looks, rejects. Another takes, looks, accepts. 2 different minds can catch the same thought form or thought wave, but the mental activities being different make different results out of them. Or it comes to one and he does nothing. Then it walks off saying, "Oh, this unready animal," and goes to another who promptly welcomes it, and it settles into expression with a joyous bubble of inspiration, illumination, or enthusiasm of original discovery or creation. And the recipient cries proudly, I have done this. Ego, sir, ego. You are the recipient, the conditioning medium, if you like, nothing more. Whoa. Thoughts unexpressed can also go out as forces and produce their effects. It is a mistake. It is a mistake to think that a thought or will can have effect only when it is expressed in speech or act. The unspoken thought, the unexpressed will, are also active energies and can produce their own vibrations, effects, or reactions. So we have the common cliche, thoughts are things. Yes, they are things and they have their effects. Positive thoughts as well as negative thoughts. If we can gather enough souls in this world to remember the truth that Sri Aurobindo and Mother have given us, we can have a definite effect, as does the Om choir. Thought can be a force which releases itself, but the ordinary surface thinking is not of that kind. There is in it more waste of energy than in anything else. It is in the thought that comes in a quiet or silent mind that there is power. It is in the thought that comes in a quiet or silent mind that there is power. Thought is not the giver of knowledge, but the mediator between the inconscient and the superconscient. It compels the world born from the inconscient to reach for a knowledge other than the instinctive vital or merely empirical. For the knowledge that itself exceeds thought, for the knowledge that itself exceeds thought. It calls for that superconscient knowledge and prepares the consciousness here to receive it. Thought is quite possible without words. Children have thoughts, animals too. Thoughts can take another form than words. Thought perceptions come first. Language comes to express the perceptions, and itself leads to fresh thoughts. Well, this was a long session, but I hope it was valuable for everyone. And now I would like someone who has not read before. Nishat, have you read before? I don't think so. Could you read for us the lines in Savitri we went through today?
Yes.
Thank you.
Armed with a limited, precarious strength, he saves his fruits of work from adverse chance. A struggling ignorance is his wisdom's mate. He waits to see the consequence of his acts. He waits to weigh the certitude of his thoughts. He knows not what he shall achieve or when. He knows not whether at last he shall survive or end like the mastodon and the sloth and perish from the earth where he was king. He is ignorant of the meaning of his life. He is ignorant of his high and splendid fate. Only the immortals on their deathless heights, dwelling beyond the walls of time and space, masters of living, free from the bonds of thought.
You have to, thank you, Vladimir.
Who are overseers of fate and chance and will, and experts of the theorem of world need, can see the idea, the might that change time's course, come maned with light from undiscovered worlds. Here, while the world toils on with its deep, blind heart, the galloping hooves of the unforeseen event, bearing the superhuman rider near, and impassive to earth's din and startled cry, return to the silence of the hills of gods, or God. As lightning leaps, as thunder sweeps, they pass and leave their mark on the trampled breast of life.
Thank you so much. This passage we will take up next week because there is so much in it. And I would like to ask Vladimir also to comment next week on the superhuman rider, whom we know as Kalki. Thank you all again for attending, and I look forward to seeing all of you next week. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Namaste.
A good session, a very good session.
Namaste.